All right, everybody. So yesterday was fun. Um, I did try to send some videos over Streamanity, but I don't know. I don't know if it was because of me, but it just kept timing out. I couldn't send the videos quick enough because time is very short. You only allowed you're only getting like 10-minute breaks or something like that, and trying to make the video and then wait for it to upload on Streamanity was just taking way too long. I did make them. I did try it, but nothing ever got posted up. I'm not sure why. So we're going to do it this way. So I apologize. I didn't get the videos up like I wanted. So this video is going to go on Streamanity, hopefully. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on page by page through all the notes that I took and try to decipher for you guys what I was saying or what was going on, or try to make it a little bit more legible. All right, so page 1, and hopefully I can remember some of this stuff. All right. Listed for me, Dr. Edman was the witness for the plaintiff, and Steve Shatters was the witness for the defense, which we already knew. They had some other witnesses, but they're going to submit their responses to questions later. They're not going to show up in court. And that's supposed to be due to the judge by next Monday. And then he'll start reading all that and start making his decision after argumentatives on the 26th. And then shortly after that's when his decision should be made. Okay. Wants to cross Steve Shatters' testimony. Yeah, okay, so there's a fight at the very beginning. They wanted Steve Shatters to testify, obviously. Where they wanted Dr. Edman to stay in the courtroom to respond to what Steve Shatters was saying. Okay, so as Steve Shatters is sitting there talking, Dr. Edman is taking notes, passing them to counsel, to Ira's team, to ask some questions to try to clarify, since they don't understand what he was saying as much as Dr. Edman was. So that's what was going on, and then they also used that to build some more questions to ask Dr. Edman when Dr. Edman got up to the stand for his testimony. Seemed, kind of shady to me. The judge allowed it, but it seemed kind of shady to me to have him sit there and listen to the witness and then, critique him as he went through. Witness, Steve, Mr. Shatters, or whoever it is. So, I mean, that seemed kind of, I don't know, I didn't like the way that played out. I think they should have been a little bit more prepared for that, and not have him sit there and listen to Steve's testimony, and then as he's giving his testimony, come up with questions and narratives and stuff like that to hand off to Ira's team. So that whole little squabble was kind of weird to me. I didn't fully understand why it happened that way. I guess that's the legal roadmaps that lawyers. That's why they get paid much, I guess. I didn't like it. All right. So yeah, Edman will stay to respond to Shatters. So like I just said, he stayed and. All right. All right. So Shatters got up there, and they went basically through the basics. What's in chain? What's it for? How long you been involved in Bitcoin? In chain. So he got involved in Bitcoin around 2011. In chain around 2017. In chain has he has a 10 to 20 year view on Bitcoin, where it will be in 10 to 20 years, whereas Craig is a lot sooner, like 2 to 5 years. So Shatters is seeing a much bigger long-term picture for Bitcoin, whereas I guess Craig is seeing, you got to get it going. We got to get going right now, along with the long term. I guess is the way to look at it. Funny thing is, I started, asking Steve, the role of the CTO is and all this stuff, and it led to one of the funnier moments. Steve says that, as we all know, Craig is not the best communicator. So they have like a team of people that try to listen to what Craig is saying and try to decipher and interpret what he's meaning by what he says. Same goes with the white paper. Basically, they got a team of interpreters, very good engineers who are trying to take this and not manipulate and convert it to what normal people think like and speak like. Not at the brain capacity that is Craig Wright. So, bravo for Steve. It was a funny moment. I guess one of those things kind of had to be the way he said it. It was a good little jab. I liked it. All right. Then they asked him, will he gain anything from the outcome of this case and either professional or monetarily? And he said, no, I don't think I'll gain anything from it. What am I going to gain? Good for you. All right. Computer-generated keys, no access. What's the purpose and involvement of to find the keys? What's the purpose of the involvement to find the keys? And sure, none is missing. So, as we know, there's Craig designed an algorithm that generated addresses or keys automatically, deposited the Bitcoin, and everything was automatic, right? So he didn't have access to these addresses. Okay. So what's the purpose of involvement to find the keys? So he wanted Steve to get in there and create a program to scan through every Bitcoin address from the time period given, which we'll get into, with some certain criteria, and wanted to do that over and over, and he wanted to ensure that nothing was missed. They wanted to make sure that as much as they could was captured. Oh, Baker says hi. That everything was captured and that they got most that they could out of the criteria given. Okay. Given list to produce keys. Right. So now the criteria was kind of a big thing brought up in court. The 6 criteria that was Craig gave to him to search through that should have coincided with what the order was from the court, right? The criteria was date, not used coins, lack of reuse, paid a public key, output paid, and the block header, the nonce header. Okay, so date criteria. Use this first for the date criteria given. So scanned through all these Bitcoin addresses and narrowed it down to about 76,000 addresses that were, Then he took a not used or unspent criteria. So obviously we know that, these coins should have never been touched, right? Moved or anything. So search the criteria for any unspent or unused coins. That narrows the list down to 30,000. All right, lack of reuse. Again, Craig is very adamant. Public addresses should be discarded immediately. Should never be reused. So they search for any addresses that were used or reused, I should say, to accept another transaction. That's not the way Craig operates. So that narrowly took back 128 addresses off. Not a lot. I'm going to put a big in it. Paid a public key. Basically looking for some different scripts that were used. That were was a kind of a stretch, but kind of used back in Satoshi as programming, the way he programmed it back then, the algorithm. No, that produced no results. There was nothing came out of that. Output paid, only used once through the Coinbase, right? So when the algorithm would dump Bitcoin into the Coinbase, It should only do it once, right? So if it got dumped, if funds or Bitcoin was dumped into the Coinbase twice on that address, then it was discarded. The algorithm produced every time it solved a block, make an address, it would dump it and discard all that and then go again. So any money that was deposited into the Coinbase twice, and that didn't limit it, only took out 68 addresses, wasn't a huge thing. The block header, or the announce, which we know that Satoshi Nakamoto used that to label his computers 1 through 58. So each computer had its own number: computer 1, computer 2, computer blah blah blah, up to computer 58, right? Steve's program that he designed scanned through and looked for any of the block header or the announces, block headers that had the numbers between 0 and 58, or 1 through 58. If it found anything other than that, higher than that, it kicked them out. Okay. You're starting to kind of see where I'm going to go with the defense, how the defense, well, I mean, not the defense, the plaintiffs kind of looked at this. And that took out 2.5 thousand addresses. He could have taken out possibly another 2.7 thousand addresses due to an error in the program that he found, but he decided to leave them out of fairness and transparency. So I just leave those 2.7 thousand in there. We have 27,000 addresses. What's another 2,000, right? No harm, no foul. It's better to do it now than better leave them in there than change it at the last minute. Looking kind of fishy. So he decided, in fairness, to leave those addresses, and I think that was a very good thing to do. All right. Announce fields get locked forever. Now, the judge got a lesson on announce fields, block headers, way addresses, and the way wallets work. It was phenomenal listening to Steve talk about how this stuff actually operates. We kind of know it already, but just hearing it from someone at that level was pretty cool. The announce can be reset after the proof of work is done for that block, I think is the way it worked. So each time you can reset, but the actual announce is recorded on the chain that was recorded to that transaction or that block forever, right? But miners can reset the announce on each block instead of going incrementally block, 1, 2, 3. They can set it to whatever they want, but the original still stays on the blockchain forever. So that CSW or Craig announced announce field recognized 4 bytes. And then he separated each byte down to each machine. I hope Steve watches this. You can kind of clarify what I'm trying to say here. I'm trying to explain some of this intricacies more so than my obvious knowledge of how stuff works. But using different machines, each machine had a different value, thus labeled in each block, right? So it goes back to the 0 through 58 numbers, and that's how he would generate. No numbers outside of 0 to 58, so he could eliminate another 2.7 thousand. All right. Okay, so the way it worked is he pulled the blockchain, wrote a code. The code searched and applied the criteria and produced about 27,000 public addresses. You can't determine date just by the public addresses, and you can't determine the miner just by the public addresses, right? And this is one of the things I want to keep hitting at. That their demand for these addresses was mute, right? It serves no purpose. Like, I can give you public addresses all day long, and it's not going to answer the questions that you want. And this went back, there was a huge discussion between the judge asking questions and about, do you not need public addresses to spend Bitcoin? which, Steve said, no, you do not need the public addresses, right? As long as you have your private key, you can generate addresses from that to spend the coin, right? So all you need is your private key. You don't need your public addresses to spend. So they kept going in circles of trying to explain that. Eventually the judge got it. He's a phenomenal judge. I really think he's going home every day and researching a lot. It just kind of shows to me the questions he was asking and the amount of detail he was looking for. So, they educated him quite well on, how the addresses were kind of pointless to the court's request by what they wanted. And the judge, seemed kind of, you're taking, whoa, so what do you mean that these are useless to the court? And then Swin had to go to explain it, like, well, they're just public addresses. All they do is just show that something has been moved or something has been spent, right? You don't have, you can use a public address to, go in Block Explorer or whatnot and see where the coins are. That's about all you can do with it, right? There's nothing else you can do with the public addresses. What you actually want is obviously the private keys, and that's what's locked away, and they can't access, which is what Craig was trying to tell the court all along. All right. So they asked, does this list of 27,000 addresses contain the public addresses of the in the time period and the public addresses that are in question? And Steve Shatters says definitely contains those addresses. We don't know which ones they are because we don't have the algorithm that was designed. That's, the secrets are locked away, and to decipher which addresses were assigned to certain coins. So again, they're just public addresses that mean absolutely nothing to anybody. All right. Can identify which executive belonged to CSW during the time period. Again, right. All right. So this is when the plaintiffs came to cross-examine Shatters shortly after this. And I will say, Steve, Mr. Shatters, Steve, I don't know what to call him. He did pretty good. He was very confident. I don't think he wavered at all. But he was there for a reason. He knew why he was there, and he's obviously the most knowledgeable person you're going to get to answer these questions. So there was really nothing to be worried about. All right. So he wasn't represented by any counsel. There was no lawyers or there anything for him. He understands what perjury is, understands, exactly the consequences of it, what it can do, what it means. Sorry, I got it. All right. They asked him when he arrived for the June 28th hearing. I asked him when he arrived. He arrived 2 days prior to that hearing. He flew in alone. He didn't fly in with CSW. He flew a commercial and he flew on economy. So nothing fancy, nothing exuberant. Just a guy I think he was coming from Canada to go to the hearing. Right. They asked about Jimmy Nguyen, who he was and what his role was. It was a very short kind of a blurb. Did you discuss the case with Jimmy? Who is he? What's his role? And then was kind of over with. Discussed testimony with Jimmy Nguyen, Craig, and Ramona. Okay, yeah, so scroll on down. 1 week prior to the June 28th hearing, there was a meeting in Bogota. The meeting consisted of lawyers, Craig's lawyers, I'm assuming, Craig, Jimmy, Steve, Ramona. And Steve was more or less there just as the technical aspect to explain, what it's going to take to try to get these addresses found, right? And 2 weeks prior to that is when, 2 weeks prior to that, around about, is when Craig asked him to come up with the lists of the addresses. There was no request to have these addresses pulled by Steve prior to June, right? So no one asked Steve Shatters to go in there and try to find these addresses prior to June. So I think what the defense is looking for here, or the plaintiff is looking for here, is, this is an order that came out, I think it was March. How come Steve wasn't involved? He was the chief technical officer of InChain, try to find these addresses. Now, in fairness, InChain is a business that Craig is part of, owns, and is the chief science officer of. But InChain really had no part in Satoshi or any of these addresses. Earlier on, it shouldn't have been a problem for InChain. It should have been a problem for Craig to come up with these addresses. Now, could he have used his powers at InChain a little bit sooner? Yeah, of course he could have. But again, InChain is a business. A business is doing its own thing. As Steve said, listen, I was a very busy person. I didn't really keep up with what's going on with this case because really, it's really not my problem. And it's not, right? So InChain is a completely separate entity. Once the pressure was put on Craig, he then had to go in and ask for some help from his friends and from Steve Shatters to try and narrow this list down as much as possible. Even though it does appear that having the access to the public addresses is a moot point, right? I think the court was asking for something that they didn't know how it works. I think now as this process goes, they're starting to understand more and more. They thought, oh, I got an address, we got the proof we need, let's go with it, right? It's way more complicated than that. It kind of makes sense why Craig kept saying, like, listen, these addresses mean nothing. There's 16,500 of these addresses somewhere that will do you absolutely no good if I can even try to find them, right? So he found them, 27,000 addresses. Somewhere in there is a 16,500 that he's looking for, and now they're learning that they do absolutely no good. Now they have them, what are they going to do with them? Go through Block Explorer and say, okay, yeah, they're not spent. Got it. Okay, thanks. That's about all you're going to get out of it. But I'll get into more detail about what's I believe is in their head. All right. So what's the purpose of meeting the lawyers in Bogota? Explain the technical aspects involved to get their addresses, right? So this is when they brought him in. I was like, listen, so how are we going to get this done, right? How can we make this happen? Stop at you. How are we going to make this happen? So they brought in Steve, and he was kind of introduced to what's going on, and like, okay, man, let's try to get it done. So no fault of Steve's at all. All right. So they started going in some numbers about the value of the coins out there. They gave them a list of potentially 25,000 addresses after you take off the other 2,000 that could have come off after Steve's realized error. So they calculated 1.25 million Bitcoin in addresses that they gave him that fit that criteria, which is kind of odd. Now remember, they're looking for a date range, looking for wallets that have 50 BTC in them because that was a block reward. They're looking for biggest thing was a 50 BTC during this time period, right? So they put up 25,000 addresses, 27,000 actually, but say chop back down to 25 like they did in the court. So there's 1.25 million Bitcoin, and they're only looking for 821,000, right? 821,000 and change. So where's the other 500,000 Bitcoin? Who owns those? That's an astronomical amount of money that's sitting out there that hasn't been touched, since 2010, and was definitely from mining rewards. So anyway, so there's a mystery 500,000 Bitcoin out there belonging to somebody that's worth an astronomical amount of money. We'll try and get lucky. All right, here's where it kind of got technical when it comes to. They were obviously leading to some type of I don't know the legal terminology, but they come down to saying is CSW didn't pay for the Bogota trip because that was InChain related. That was a business expense. So InChain paid Steve Shatters for those expenses, hotels and stuff, right? So they asked him, okay, well, did InChain pay for your travel expenses to come to the June 28th hearing or this hearing. And Steve's belief was that no, it came from Craig, who was then going to get reimbursed from InChain, right? So you can see where they're leading off at is, Craig is paying for this witness. I think it's kind of weak, where they're kind of stretching on that, but they're saying Craig will, bias the witness by paying for all of his expenses to come down here. They went to what he ate, what kind of food he ate, how he flew. Again, it was all just commercial. And on the way back from when he left the June 28th hearing, he flew commercial, but he flew business class, right? But he had to pay the extra from the coach to the business upgrade, so he had to pay that extra cost, or else, InChain was going to fly him coach. Okay. So it was very fair, it seemed to me, pretty legit. I don't know when it comes to InChain paying for it. I don't know who's supposed to pay for it. Again, that's more lawyer stuff that I don't understand. But I knew that's what they were getting at. Like, okay, so obviously you're biased to this guy because he's paying for everything to come down here. He's paying for your food. He's paying for all this stuff. But he wasn't really paying that much, right? He paid his plane ticket. He paid his hotel. Pretty much everything else Steve had to pay for. All right. They asked how the structure went. Who does Steve report to? Steve says, I report to the CEO, but I have a dotted line to CSW. So they asked him, was he your boss? Steve says, well, it's his company, so yes, he's my boss, so to speak, but I report directly to the CEO of InChain. I don't report directly to Craig. All right. And the company structure, that's the way it's going to work, it's the way it has to work, and that makes perfect sense. They asked if they're friends. Shatter says yes. Me and Dr. Wright are friends. They asked him what proof he was given that Craig Wright was Satoshi Nakamoto. And this was interesting. Steve says, I never saw any proof. He believes that something came up when they're standing around a barbecue grill one day. And Craig said, oh, you want proof? I can show you proof. And Steve denied it. He said, no, I don't want to see any proof. I don't need to see it, and I want to see it. And he said, because maybe whatever it is, whatever proof can come back in and bite him in the ass later on, right? So it's just better not to see whatever proof you're going to show me. I believe on merit, and I believe on what's out there now. That's what he's going with, right? So he said there's enough circumstantial evidence out there by the tons that leads me to believe, and after having conversations with him, how his understanding of Bitcoin is, that he believes Craig Wright can only be Satoshi Nakamoto. These are Steve's words, right? So that's kind of interesting. Steve could have saw absolute proof, but to maintain kind of neutrality and not see something that he probably shouldn't be privy to. I mean, who knows? But I think it was good for him to do that. That says a lot about his character. That he was willing to step out and like, no, man, because I know I wouldn't want to see it, and I'm sure vast majority of you people want to see what proof this is, obviously. But he made a conscious decision. So no, it's not worth it to me to see whatever you want to show me, right? Because then now my name is on this list of people who actually know for sure that's seen the proof or lack of proof or whatnot. I just rather not. Listen, I know what you're saying. I listen to you speak. I read what you write. I talk to you every day. I know your understanding of Bitcoin. That's all I need, man. I don't need your proof. Right? All right. They asked him how long he spent looking for the addresses. All in all, over a 2-week period. He said it wasn't straight 2 weeks. He wrote the code. All in all was probably about a week of just steady searching for the addresses. So once he coded the program in Java, the program did the vast majority of the work, made it very simple. He just had to go through and filter the results, compare the results with the program, filter a lot of nonsense, and make it more of a legible form to produce to the court. That's it. All right. Depending on criteria given by CSW, exactly right. So Craig gave him exactly what to look for and says, you can't deviate from this criteria, right? So the date range has to be January 3rd, 2009 to August 21st, 2010. Only that date range, not before, not after. The reason why is because that's when, he stopped doing the mining into the, using the algorithm or whatever he was doing at the time. So he said, stick with that date range and only that date range. Plaintiffs, took caution of this for reasons. So, and that eliminated down to, again, like I said, 75,000. They said, could you have run any date range? Yeah, I could have run any date range I want. I could just put a date range into the program and run it. No big deal. Why didn't you? Because that was not the criteria that was given to me to search. Unspent coins. It is knowledge that CSW did spend some Bitcoin early on out of some addresses. So they're asking, like, well, why'd you only search for unspent? I guess that's the criteria that was given, because out of the addresses that were in question, they should not have any that were spent. They didn't really get into detail about, okay, what are these addresses then that Craig did spend out of, right? And also, there's several blocks, which is later on, I think, like block 9, which is the block where the pizza was spent out of. Block 9, block 12, and block 64. Block 64 went to Mike Hearn. I'm not sure where block 12 went, and block 9 was for the pizza, stuff like that, right? So, those addresses weren't included. So why didn't you include the address that the pizza was spent out of? If some of these addresses were spent, you should have included them regardless of what your criteria says. But they're now not on this list, right? Which does make sense. Okay, so you knew these addresses were during the correct time period, but you failed to include them because they were spent out of, which in the court's eyes makes sense. They wanted all addresses from this time period. So it could have just been a drop in communication. When you're under pressure for a federal court and they're trying to get this done, you just don't connect the dots fully. I could see that happening. Or it could be that Craig didn't want certain addresses to be seen and hope that if I give you 27,000 addresses, you'll be happy. And it's overwhelming amount of data, and that's what you got to sort through. Maybe they'll just kind of forget about it, right? I don't know if that's the case. I personally don't think so. I think they were trying their best to give the court what they wanted in the short amount of time that they had after June 28th court case. That's just my view. All right. All addresses contain 50 BTC mostly. A couple might have some minor fees, but all in all, the average should be a 50 BTC. All right, and then the final outcome came for the 27,000 addresses when they applied the process of the nonce of the block headers to add the 0 to 58 numbers to identify the computers that was solving the blocks, right? All in all, they're looking for 16.5 thousand addresses that belonged to Satoshi during that time period. 16.5 thousand. All right, next page. All right, there's something else over here. First blocks were mined, according to Shatters, first 10 to 15 blocks or so were mined using a laptop. He says he believed that Craig had a laptop, and that's what he was using to mine with back then for the first 10 or 15 blocks. All right. Can't spend Bitcoin without a private key, but you can spend Bitcoin without a public key. Again, this is where they broke down to the judge exactly how addresses, wallets, and all this stuff worked. It was great to listen to. Craig set up an automated mining process that mined everything and dumped everything into these wallets. When did Craig put keys into the secret system? Didn't he need to know anything? He needed to know the root, right? So they were leading out. He had to have access to the private keys to apply the Schmear scheme. So he had to have access to these things to set them up and to get it running. There are a couple of names that came up on a laptop. Kevin Madura and B. Robertson. there were some files that were on the screen and that was connected to the laptop that had the whole court case going on. I don't know who those names are, Kevin Madura and B. Robertson. They have something to do with the case. All right, that's pretty much all. After they asked Steve about the does he need private keys, like how he's going to set up the Schmear scheme. Without this, I do believe Steve's answer was that he would have needed the root key to set this whole thing up. But that could have been from lack of understanding how the process worked, and he wasn't there. He wasn't involved with it. He doesn't really know what CSW did to break these up, right? So that was more of a, I don't know if I would agree with that question. Why wasn't it object to as hearsay? Because he wasn't involved in it. He doesn't really know exactly what process Craig applied to this. All right. So into that, and then Dr. Edmond came up. Dr. Edmond was asked what criteria he applied to find out whether or not these documents were forged or fraudulent. It became a very big thing that they didn't want him to even testify because he was interjecting his personal opinion of something being fraud, I guess. Personal opinion, I don't really know it. And I guess the report that he gave to the court was calling several things forged and frauds and stuff like that. So, and then coming down where the judge says, okay, you cannot testify to fraud, right? Because that's not why you're here. You're here to determine whether something is a forgery. And they went through and they defined the definitions of fraud, and they went through and they defined the definitions of forgery and what the parties are looking for in those criteria, so they can guide Dr. Edmond better and get the answers they're looking for. So that was kind of cool. So he analyzed headers and cryptographic signatures, along with the context of the information and the body of the information. He would analyze that. Obviously, went to the fonts and everything like that. But he's really focused on the headers and the cryptographic signatures that were embedded into each document, and the metadata. Obviously, sum it up, just the metadata. All right. Object to Dr. Edmond's testimony due to using user-generated data or / metadata. Again, yeah, I mean, some of this metadata and stuff is user-injected, not computer-injected, which does, allow some doubt and some certainty about who did it, etc., which they later get back into. But that's the reason they were objected to it, and along with the fraud part. When they had Dr. Edmond up there questioning him whether or not he should be allowed to testify and what his expertise are and stuff, the defense was stumbling quite a bit. They couldn't quite understand what the judge I guess, what the judge is at. The judge can only base whether or not he can testify on certain criteria, right? And I didn't write it, I can't really remember, but basically it's very basic information, right? Is he qualified? Does the information or the testimony fit with what we're looking for? And I forgot the third one, but it's very, very basic stuff. And the defense kept wanting to cross-examine him before any real questions were even asked. They kept going into, why does he feel this is forged, or why is that forged or fraudulent or whatnot, going back and forth. The judge kept saying, "Oh, listen, you got to stick with these 3 very basic criteria. You have to hit on these points only before I can rule whether or not he can testify. You can't sit here and cross-examine this witness when, there hasn't even been any questions yet. It's not your time to question the witness on the case per se like that in that kind of detail." And they kept doing it over and over. It was like, God, man, you gotta let it go. So it was pretty hard to watch that. They really kept stumbling because they wanted to really put it out there that they don't think he should have been testifying for this. So it was very interesting. In the end, they got it out, and the judge ruled that he's fine to testify. He just cannot testify to the fact of fraud or the allegation of fraud. All right. Can't testify if it's fraud, only to it being a forgery. Again, that's the only thing you can say is that it was, on the level of forgery, not that a fraud was committed, because again, you don't know, right? You don't know what the reasoning was that this was altered or how it was altered or anything like that right now. You just know that it was altered, it's just forgery, right? You can't prove fraud, so you can't sit here, especially in a federal court, and lay claim to fraud when you can't prove it, right? The judge acknowledged the CSW claim documents were hacked. Dr. Edmond testified only that they were altered, not by who. Again, Craig mentioned, and I'm sure it's been mentioned in deposition and stuff like that before, that his servers were hacked in Australia by nefarious people trying to liquidate his companies. So the judge briefly mentioned it. He understood that someone else could have manipulated these documents. Again, so you can't put fraud in there because there was no fraud with the parties. You can't prove fraud with any of the parties involved with this case. So he wanted to strictly cut and dry, forged or not forged. Was the document forged? Was the document not forged? You're not going to prove by who, so you can't claim fraud. Okay. All right. Dr. Edmond, he worked for the FBI, doing all kinds of stuff. He was part of the team working on Silk Road. He ID'd the servers that were running the website and some wallets, etc., and went through and decrypted a lot of all this, if not all of it, or his team did. That helped bring down Silk Road. So, congratulations on him. Sorry, boss. Review documents to verify authenticity and what were your findings. So, what is a summary before we go into this? What is a summary of what happened with all these documents when we gave them to you? Basically, the documents that were submitted to him, he said were manipulated or forged. And they went through emails, several emails, the Tulip Trust, invoices, and they went through a lot of documents, a lot of various PDFs, and each one, I would say, tried to keep count, but they kept going back and forth between several of the different documents. But I want to say there was a total of 5 or 6 documents that were, I think 5, that were given to the courts that Dr. Edmond analyzed and determined were altered or manipulated in some way. Usually dates obviously were manipulated, and in the case of the email, dates and the to from fields were edited, stuff like that. All right. Metadata, info about a file. So they started going, okay, what is all this? What is metadata? He was looking at the metadata, which is the info about the file, the internal structure of the document itself, and then the cryptographic signatures that were assigned to some of these documents, which, again, it's a means to verify the origin of where this document originally came from. So if you look at these documents that were submitted, you'll see the PGP key at the bottom. That's what he was going after. All right. Tulip Trust PDF. Signature presented. Okay, Exhibit 6 and Exhibit 2, right? So you had 2 emails that were presented, one from 2014, one through 2011, and they compared these 2 documents. And he broke it down, and this was the email concerning the trusts and how mad CSW must be, but they believe in what they do, all this mess, right? So they analyzed all this stuff and compared the 2 side by side and broke it down metadata by metadata. I went through various, and all that was submitted to the court. It's in Court Listener. I think I have it on my drive too. Exactly different lines and how it correlated and where it was changed and how it was changed. And, in the end, everything they went through, these 5 or 6 documents, they were altered. Now, why or how, I don't know, but it was interesting to see, what happened, that they weren't obviously altered by somebody somehow. So, keep that in mind. All right. Use what's called a 010 editor to extract the metadata from the documents. I guess it's an editor they use quite often to extract metadata. I think it's a hex editor, really is all it is. All right, then you started going down the different fields, what they're looking at when they're looking at this metadata, right? Because it's a big, long list of, like 50 or 60 different lines, sometimes even more. And each line represents a different something, right? XMP field, the creator tool field, et cetera, et cetera. So what's the XMP meta field? It's used to ID the software and the date that was used. The creator tool field, most of these were all created with Adobe PDF 11. Opened in Outlook, saved as a PDF. So they were all opened in Outlook and then saved to a computer from Outlook as a PDF. Email received December 12th, 2014. It was sent by Craig at ProtonScript. Hold on. I wrote this down. Pentocrypt. I don't know if I'm saying pentocrypt.com. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. That's his email address, Pentocrypt. So it's sent by Craig Wright at pentocrypt.com. And sent to Craig at pentocrypt.com. So it's sent by Craig and then sent to Craig, at least that email address. All right. The PDF created from emails sent from and to CSW. And the mail transport header contained the computer info from the server. So they're able to look at the IP, the time this was sent, and he took that IP and he ran it through a Go IP2 is a program which is by MaxMind to locate IP 14.1.18.30, and that located to Eastern Australia is where these emails originated from. All right. All right. Timestamp on signature was October 2014 from the domain inoptocrypt.com. All right, so the timestamp from the mail server inoptocrypt.com had the document timestamp October 2014 instead of, I think this was a 2011 email, was timestamped 2014 by Inoptocrypt. Interesting. All right. So had this whole email chain, how, where it started to where it ended, right? And that's what this next section is. So it started. Now all these computer names are the same, right? Which is PC CSW 01, October 17, 2014, at 1:04 a.m. That's where it ended, right? It began on October 16, 2014 at 8:04:55 p.m. and got moved around, and then it got changed again on October 16th at 9:04, and then again at October 17th at 1:04:53, and then again, these are milliseconds, right, in between each other, and I didn't write that on milliseconds, but basically within the same minute, a document went from one email address to another email address, right, in that chain, right. Return path to all of these was Craig at panatocrypt.com. Craig's email. All right. There's also another email that was associated, which was craig.wright@hotwire.pe.com. They're not sure how that played in, but that was on one of the email addresses that it went to. Computer added information is a to, the from, and the subject. Those are all computer generated fields, not user generated fields. June 24, 2011 is when the email is the date that it had. So they're asking on the metadata. They're asking, so how can that metadata show it's June 24, 2011, but when the server tagged it, it was October 17th, 2014, right? October 2014. How can that happen? They say, well, Dr. Edmond said the easiest way to do that is to set your clock back on your computer. Just set it back, set your date back and everything, and then when it sends it out, that's what it'll tag it with. But again, you still have your other server, mail server, that's going to tag the mail as it goes through there, which is what happened, right? So the computer time was changed to send the email out that would label that email until you really dug into it and pulled the metadata. So when that email goes through the mail server, it now picks up another time and date and continues on out. So they were able to pull that out. So it's kind of definitive that that email was sent in October of 2014 for whatever reason, right? They asked, how do you change the time after that? He said, well, you have to have access to the mail server, direct access to the mail server, and they do the same thing, would change the time on the mail server. But since he was using this Panopto web thing or Optocrypto, whatever this was, they had their own servers. So you're not going to have direct access to those. So, if you're going to do this, set up your own mail server and route your email to your own mail server. Change your times that way, I guess. My learning lessons. All right, the Xmailer line shows a type of software used, and Microsoft Outlook 15 was used to send the email. All right, Microsoft Outlook 15 was released in late 2013, according to Microsoft. Can manipulate data on a PC and only with direct access to the mail server, which I just talked about. Tulip Trust PDF, same as submitted document from 2014 email. It was verified. It was the PDF. It was a 2014 PDF, not 2011. Okay. Metadata extracted from 2011. The document ID is an identifier to represent multiple versions. Document ID is the same on both the 2014 and the 2011 PDFs, the Tulip Trust document. So the document ID changes if the document were to change, right? But since the document didn't change, it kept the same document ID. So how are you going to have a 2011 PDF or a 2014 PDF in 2011 with the same document ID? Okay. Instance ID specific version of the document. Instant ID, the two revisions of the same document, right? So the instance ID shows, was it changed or what's the instance of this? And they were both the same. Again, so how do you have a 2014 instant ID and 2011? You don't, okay? Mail date, June 24, 2011. Mail from Dave at davekleiman.com to Craig at whatever, panoptocrypt.com. Things that were changed, modified dates, 12 and 14, October 12, 2014. All right, XMP meta field, the build time, all right, August 23rd, 2012. So the build time of the software in the XMP field was August 23rd, 2012, which is the same as the 2014 email. The mail transport, go on the next page. Mail transport header was drastically altered for the one emails. Specifically, go back to line 27 of the metadata if you want to pull all this out. You'll see 14.3.169.1, which is the version software of the SMTP server that was used. That SMTP server version didn't come out to November 2013, but yet this is a June 24, 2011 email. And also, 11th was a Friday. I think they had it as a Thursday, so they had the wrong date. Return path goes back to Craig at ProjectCrypto.com. Okay, I know this is getting kind of crazy, and I'm trying to explain it the best I can. Again, this is way over my head, so I'm just trying to give you the information. I understand because I was there and I understand it, and I'm trying to explain it the best I can. All right, 2014 email was modified. The modified from mail. So the from field was modified. If you look on metadata, an unaltered document, it'll all just be flow just fine, right? When there's any change, you'll see this touch up underscore text, right? Touch up underscore text edit. Would there be a line for that? And up under that line is the stuff that was altered. So they were able to determine that in the 2014 email, the from field was modified from Craig Wright to Dave Kleiman. And the to field was altered from Craig to Dave. And then the time and date fields were modified. Again, all this is, you pull up the metadata, you scan it, you see that touch up underscore text edit. That's what was altered. The computer automatically tags that. You really can't do nothing about it. So the document ID is the same as the 2011 and 2014 email. And the PGP key that was generated in 10/24/2014. Now this is the same PGP key that's on the email in 2011. So, and we'll get into the key couldn't have been produced any earlier than that. It's a 2014 PGP key. Okay. And they use the RSA key, the A0DA, which I don't know if you've been involved, you've seen this RSA key before. It's the same key that was used in the Tulip Trust email and the Coin Exchange email. This is the email that Dave sent. Dave sent in regards to he will take charge and become director of the Coin Exchange. Again, that email was submitted, but it's the same key. And the email was sent in 2014. Now, how they can determine, one way to determine the PGP key is by the versions, right? So if you look at the email on these altered emails, it's got GNU PGV2. Now, if it says V2, that is the newer software. The older software would say V2.134 or whatever, the longer software version number. The new ones just cut that out now. They just go version 2 or version 3 or whatnot. Okay? Which some of the other emails, if you look, the PGP key does say version 2.0.1, whatever, right? So that was one easy way right off the bat to sit here and say, oh, okay, this PGP key does not belong on a 2011 document. It's odd. All right, deed of trust. The deed of trust was signed in October 23rd, 2012. The metadata showed that the author was Craig Wright. Creation date of October 22nd, 2012. Dr. Edmond analyzed the fonts in this document, and there were 5 embedded fonts suggesting the creation in 2015. Line 725. May 22nd, 2015, provided by Microsoft. The font used in that line, obviously, if you pull it up, it shows the copyright of 2015. And this is, he used Microsoft as a reference, went to Microsoft, the website, and pulled when these fonts were released, and that's when they were released. And I know people have shown other ways where that can happen, and they did address that later on, which we'll get into. All right, so the key on that one, on the Tulip Trust document, was created February 28th, 2014. But now this Tulip Trust document was emailed in 2012. But it has a PGP key that was created in February 28th, 2014. Okay. There was another one where it was key was March 5th, 2014, and the email was sent in 2013. All right, now let's go to the bit message. Now I'm confused by this whole bit message. They keep hitting on it, and I got it. I think it's a moot point. I don't think it means anything. But how do you? They never went into how you faked. I don't remember seeing how you would fake a bit message, right? How would you alter that? I mean, they're saying it was, but I don't know how. So bit message was released in November 19th, 2012. So any of those bit messages that were on there prior to November 19th, they say could not have happened because bit message was not released. So to confirm this, they brought in Jonathan Warren, which is the creator of BitMessage. And they asked him all these questions. It was a deposition. And Dr. Edmond read that deposition and the interview and made assumptions off of what was said. In the end, it looked like he might have cherry-picked a little bit or a lot the responses and choose to pick the responses that fit what his answers were going to be, right? According to Dr. Edmond, when he testified, he believed Jonathan Warren alluded to that no version could have been obtained before November 19th, 2012. How we got that reference, because later on, which you get into, just makes no sense. But according to Dr. Edmond, he believed that Jonathan Warren stated that there could be no version obtained prior to November 19th. Okay. Then we went into a highsecured.com invoice. And I know I'm going back and forth because that's what we did in court. Back and forth, it was crazy. I'm just taking these notes, man. All right, so highsecured.com, an invoice that was submitted by highsecured.com. They pulled it up, and there was a bunch of red highlighted fields, and they said, yeah, this was obviously a forged document. I mean, these are the areas that the metadata says were forged, and it was invoice numbers, amounts, dates, all this stuff, which was changed, okay, and it was an altered document. I'm not going to deny it, but it was an altered document. We're about to find out why. All right, so that was it. So that was the last thing it ended with. They wanted to show up the invoice. They wanted to leave on a good note, a slam dunk, like, yep, all this was changed. This invoice is fake. This just shows the character of whoever's doing all these changes. And they left it at that. So now we're going to cross-examination by the defense. They confirmed through Dr. Edmond that PDF metadata can easily be altered by anyone at any time. All right, and this is relating back to the hack, obviously. Or not just the hack, just anybody could have at any time changed these documents without Craig knowing. And reasonable doubt is important in court, right? I mean, you need to be certain. Metadata does not tell a person, right, of the person that modified it. It doesn't, right? It just shows up the data was modified in some way. You don't know who did it. You just know it was done, okay? Documents could have been altered by anybody, correct? Then I started asking, do you know what alpha is or what beta is? He's like, yes, those are test programs. Alpha is very early on. Beta is a bit more refined software, etc. So they asked him, how do you know that someone couldn't have been using alpha or beta software for some of this stuff, i.e. like the PGP key generator or the bit message or stuff like that. Like, how do you know that something wasn't being used? You don't. And you got to assume that in a world that cryptographers live in and the dark web and all this that people were having access. I know back in my day, I would always have software out way before anybody else would. I was an alpha beta junkie. I was beta testing for Windows, and I would be beta testing something years before it came out. I remember beta testing, even Windows Longhorn. Pretty much all versions of Windows I tested, but then I would test just all kinds of software, and it would be months, years sometimes for this, if even software got released. And that's what I did. I lived on these sites, and I was always looking for that, because I wanted to see the latest thing. I had to have the latest and the greatest. So I can very easily see that these guys living in this world would want to use new software that the other people weren't using, that they could test and they could see, is this fixed? Especially something like BitMessage. Come on, really? You're looking at these programs that people use all the time, cryptographic key generators, and a way to message securely. You add all this up, I can see somebody using early software for it. Okay. Signatures. Were signatures not factored in? Okay, so you go back to the Tulip Trust document, where the PGP key was supposed to be stated from 2014 for a document that was done in 2012. But yet none of the people that signed the document are refuting the claim. They're not saying that this isn't right. They're not saying that this is not my signature, or I wasn't there for signing this. And they asked him, so why wasn't this factored in? And he was like, don't know. I was just told to get the information and see whether or not it was changed. And these documents were altered. I cannot speak for the people who signed it. But it is a good point. If it was changed or altered in some way, it seems like the people who signed it would come up and say, this is not right. They didn't. Okay. Embedded fonts. Okay, so she brought this up real quick, real flyby. She says, what if a company needed these documents and they weren't in any kind of format, and they used an OCR, say for an ATO investigation, and they used an OCR to pull the information and translate the information? Would it not give the different fonts? He said yes. He was looking at some of the stuff as a stretch, and some of it is a stretch, but again, you have to allow for any scenario, especially with the group of people we're talking about back then, right? So she alluded to the fact that these could have been altered via an OCR that was used to pull the documents for the ATO investigation. Okay? Something tells me that I have proof that happened, which is the reason why they brought it up. Don't know. High secured invoice used as a template. If you look at the fields that were altered, I can very easily, because I have done it 100 times myself, if not more. You look at the fields that were altered. You created an invoice out of blue one day. You're a small time guy. You download some pings and PNG files, and you create this invoice from another company's invoice, or however you want to do it. Usually I'd get an invoice and I'd create it from another company's invoice, and I would change what needed to be changed, and that was that. I've done it countless times. So it's very conceivable that this high secured invoice was just a template that years ago they pulled off when they started this company, or they needed an invoice real quick. They printed it off, they changed this stuff, and all they did was change the invoice number and dates and times and services rendered and all this. That's what was changed. Of course, you can look at it both ways, like, well, it was changed to obviously fit this narrative. Yes, but speaking from personal experience, and I'm sure some of you have done it before, you have pulled off an invoice off the internet and changed it to fit your company. Someone else did all the work. All I gotta do is change my company name. So one of the things, the name was High Secured. High wasn't changed, but Secured was. So it could have been an invoice for, who knows, right? High Times. And they took off the times and put Secured, and they wanted to use that invoice from then on, right? And then all they would do would go back in and just change information as needed per customer and submit it out, right? I don't know how big of a company High Secured is, I doubt it was huge back then. Again, I don't know though. I'm not going to say it, but speaking from my experience, I have done that before, and I can see that happening very easily. Okay. Bit message. I'll go back to bit message again. Let's round this up. So Dr. Edmond supposedly read through Jonathan Warren's deposition and answers to the deposition, and made opinions based on what Jonathan Warren said concerning to the creation of bit message and its availability at the time. Bit message. Jonathan Warren stated there could have been a version released on the dark web earlier to the November 19th, 2012 release. Could have. It's interesting he said that. It's like, yeah, it could have been something released. He would know. It seems to me he may be alluding to the fact that it was a copy released on the dark web because he had people testing it, and it says it. Other people could have helped and tested, and Jonathan Warren talked to Dr. Wright about bit message early on. So it's very, very conceivable that Craig Wright had access to an early beta version or alpha version of bit message, and Dave shared it with each other so they can communicate earlier on. Very conceivable. It makes more sense. Like and they haven't explained it. How would you doctor a bit message? They haven't explained that, and I don't know how you would do that. So I think the most reasonable takeaway from that is that yes, Craig Wright and Dave had access to bit message at that time. However it may be, it only makes sense. Unless someone can come up and tell me how you alter or forge a bit message, I don't see any other solution. I just don't. All right. So that concluded it. Again, the next hearing is going to be argumentatives over the evidence given, the totality of it all, because they're still submitting stuff from other witnesses. All that's due by this Monday, and then the judge will start reading it and really dive into getting in his head what kind of decision he wants to make. And then he'll hear argumentatives at 1:30 on the 26th, against the evidence that was given, to hash out any final details. And then from there, he's going to make his decision, which I don't think it'll be very long. I think he has a very good understanding of the way things are working. So I think he'll come up with a decision pretty quick. But then again, who knows? It is a big case, and it's a precedent case, so maybe he'll take some time, but I don't know. I think he'll come up with something pretty quick. So that was it. That's going over all my notes. I'm sorry if I talk quick. There's a lot to go over. I'm already an hour and 12 minutes into this. I do want to do a live Periscope later on, so I can try to answer questions better than this. And plus, this is only going to be posted on Streamanity. So I want to do a live video where I kind of break down this stuff to some people and leave this main overall view of my wife beater, and I look like an asshole. All right, guys. I appreciate it. Again, I'm only really talking about this on Twitch. I do get questions on Twitter. I answer them very sporadically, but I've been trying to push them to use Twitch to look at this stuff. I don't know how long I'm going to keep it just on Twitch. I may do it forever. I really just don't care about the trolls on Twitter that much to really give them the pleasure of chewing me apart like they did last time. I selectively release it to some people, but just I don't want that hassle on full-on Twitter. So anyway, there's a lot to go through. There's a lot to read. Hopefully you can read my writing for the stuff I put out there on the Google Drive. And I will be around to answer any questions as best as I can. Shatters, Steve, buddy, hopefully he can answer some of these questions better than I can. So if you could, tag him in some questions that he might know versus me, I know he can't talk about the case at all, but when it comes to how something works, maybe he can enlighten a little bit better, more so than me. I'm just a pencil jockey trying to write this stuff down and give it to you guys. So, okay, with that, oh, shit. With that, I'm signing off. Snickers is running around me like a crazy person. Oh, there he is. And Snickers says goodbye. Say goodbye, Snickers. Goodbye. All right, guys. Talk to y'all later.